The air in the VIP lounge was thick with expensive perfume and desperate ambition. Dozens of flawless, starving models held their breath as Chicago's most ruthless syndicate boss walked down the line. He didn't look twice at any of them. Instead, he stopped dead in front of the one woman who didn't belong. The Gold Coast Ballroom at the Drake Hotel was a masterclass in opulent intimidation. Dripping in crystal chandeliers and velvet drapery, it was the sort of room where millions of dollars changed hands over whispered conversations and clinking champagne flutes. Tonight, it was hosting a charity gala, a poorly veiled front for Chicago's underground elite to network without the FBI breathing down their necks. Madeline stood in the shadowy alcove near the kitchen service doors, a heavy clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. She was an auditor for KPMG, sent here by the hotel's corporate parent company to oversee the silent auction ledgers. She was also, undeniably, the largest woman in the room. In a sea of size 0 runway models flown in from Milan and New York, specifically to act as living, breathing decorations for the mobsters and corrupt politicians in attendance, Madeline felt like a complete anomaly. Her simple black wrap dress was a size 18, clinging to thick thighs, a heavy bosom, and soft, generous hips. She had spent the last 3 hours trying to make herself invisible, shrinking against the floral wallpaper whenever a statuesque blonde in backless silk glided past. Just keep your head down, balance the auction bids, and get out before midnight, Madeline muttered to herself, pushing a stray lock of brown hair behind her ear. Suddenly, the ambient hum of the ballroom dropped to a dead, terrified silence. The string quartet stopped playing mid-note. The clinking of glasses ceased. Madeline looked up from her spreadsheet, her heart giving a violent, unprompted lurch. The heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom had swung open. Standing in the threshold was Dominic Russo. Even as an accountant who spent her life buried in spreadsheets, Madeline knew exactly who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew the Russo family. They controlled the ports, the sanitation unions, and a vast network of real estate shell companies. Dominic, the newly anointed head of the family after his father's sudden passing, was a myth brought to terrifying life. He was tall, impossibly so, with shoulders broad enough to eclipse the doorway. He wore a bespoke Brioni suit that fit his predatory frame with lethal precision. His jaw was a sharp slash of granite, his eyes as dark and unforgiving as the bottom of Lake Michigan. Flanked by 3 massive men, including his notorious underboss Matteo, Dominic stepped into the room. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Valerie, the frantic socialite who had organized the event, practically tripped over her stilettos, rushing forward to greet him. "Mr. Russo, we are so honored. Please, I've arranged the VIP lounge for you. The girls are waiting." Valerie gestured nervously toward a velvet-roped section, where at least 20 stunning, impossibly thin models were arranged on white leather sofas. They immediately straightened, posing, throwing out their chests and tilting their chins, their eyes hungry. They knew a single night catching the attention of Dominic Russo could mean a penthouse on Rush Street and a 6-figure allowance. Dominic didn't even acknowledge Valerie. He simply began to walk. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of an apex predator. He bypassed the politicians trying to catch his eye. He bypassed the terrified waiters. He approached the velvet rope. Isabella, a famous Victoria's Secret alumni with cheekbones that could cut glass, stood up. She offered Dominic a sultry, practiced smile, letting her fur wrap slip off one perfectly sculpted shoulder. "Good evening, Dominic," she purred, her voice carrying in the silent room. Dominic didn't break his stride. He walked right past Isabella as if she were a mannequin. He walked past a striking Russian brunette. He walked past a towering Brazilian beauty. He didn't spare a single glance at the perfection desperate for his attention. Instead, his dark eyes locked onto the shadows near the kitchen. He was looking exactly where Madeline stood. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Madeline's veins. She instinctively took a step back, her heel hitting the swinging metal door of the service kitchen. "He's not looking at me," she told herself frantically. "There must be someone behind me." She glanced over her shoulder, but there was only a busboy who looked like he was about to faint. When she turned back, Dominic Russo was crossing the ballroom floor, making a straight line for her alcove. The entire ballroom watched in stunned, breathless disbelief. Isabella's mouth actually hung open. Valerie let out a choked squeak. Dominic stopped exactly 2 feet in front of Madeline. Up close, he smelled of cold night air, expensive Tom Ford tobacco cologne, and danger. He was so close she had to tilt her head back to look at his face. The sheer size of him was overwhelming, but what truly paralyzed her was his gaze. He wasn't looking at her the way people usually looked at the fat girl at a high society party, with pity, disgust, or complete dismissal. His dark eyes swept over her body, taking in the generous curve of her breasts, the dip of her waist, the heavy flare of her hips beneath the cheap black fabric. His gaze was heavy, hot, and unapologetically ravenous. "You're shaking," Dominic said. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated right into Madeline's chest. I'm not," Madeline lied, her voice trembling. She gripped her clipboard so hard, her knuckles turned white. "Your knuckles are white," he pointed out, a faint, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. "And you're hiding in a corner." "I am an auditor," Madeline managed to say, channeling every ounce of professional dignity she possessed. "I'm working. I don't belong out there. Belong." Dominic took a half step closer, entirely invading her personal space. The heat radiating from his large body enveloped her. "You're the only real thing in this entire room," he murmured, his eyes dropping to her plush lips. "Everything else is just plastic and bone. But you—" He reached out, slowly, deliberately. Madeline gasped softly as his large, calloused thumb brushed against her cheek, wiping away an invisible speck of dust. The contact sent a jolt of pure electricity straight to her core. "You're Madeline Hayes," he said softly. Her heart stopped. The romantic, terrifying spell shattered. He knew her name. The air evaporated from Madeline's lungs. The massive ballroom, the staring models, the whispering elite. It all faded into a tunnel of white noise. "How do you know my name?" she breathed, stepping back, her lower back pressing hard against the cool metal of the kitchen doors. Dominic didn't retreat. He simply closed the distance again, a predator boxing in his prey. "You work for KPMG, Junior Forensic Accountant. 3 days ago, you were auditing the charitable trust for this gala, and you flagged a discrepancy in the catering budget. A shell company called Southside Imports." Madeline's blood ran cold. Southside Imports. She had found a massive money laundering loop in the ledger, millions of dollars being cycled through the gala's fake floral and catering vendors. She had written up a preliminary report, intending to submit it to her managing partner on Monday. "Southside Imports belongs to you," she realized aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "It belongs to the family," Dominic corrected smoothly. "When my people in the hotel's network told me a junior accountant had cracked a $20 million washing cycle. I expected some grizzled veteran. Instead, I get a beautiful, brilliant woman trying to hide her curves in a dark corner. He said the word curves with a heavy Italian cadence that made Madeline's stomach do a violent flip. He wasn't insulting her. He was admiring her. The cognitive dissonance was enough to make her dizzy. He was a mafia boss, threatening her over a multi-million-dollar federal crime, and yet he was staring at her mouth like he wanted to devour her. I haven't filed the report yet, Madeline said, her survival instincts finally kicking in. I can just delete it. Dominic let out a low, dark chuckle. I know you haven't filed it, Madeline. If you had, we wouldn't be having this conversation. My associates would have handled you differently. The implication hung in the air, heavy and lethal. But then, Dominic continued, his gaze dropping to the rapid rise and fall of her heavy breasts, I saw you standing here, and my plans changed. He turned his head slightly, not taking his eyes off her, and snapped his fingers. Matteo, the towering underboss, stepped forward instantly, ignoring the terrified gasps of the onlookers. Matteo, inform the host that Miss Hayes will no longer be working the ledger tonight, Dominic ordered, his voice echoing in the dead, silent room. She will be joining me in my booth. Yes, boss, Matteo grunted, shooting Madeline an impassive look before turning toward the trembling event planner. Madeline's eyes widened. Across the room, Isabella and the other models were watching with expressions ranging from pure shock to venomous jealousy. The undisputed king of Chicago's underworld had ignored a lineup of the world's most beautiful women to claim the plump, terrified accountant. No, Madeline said. The word slipped out before she could stop it. It wasn't loud, but in the silence of the ballroom, it sounded like a gunshot. Dominic slowly turned his full attention back to her. The faint amusement vanished from his face, replaced by a mask of cold, terrifying authority. Excuse me. Madeline swallowed hard, her knees shaking so violently she thought she might collapse. But an inexplicable spark of anger flared up through her terror. She was tired of being pushed around, by her boss, by society, by the men who treated her like she was invisible, and now by a mobster who thought he could summon her like a dog. I said no, Madeline repeated, her voice steadier this time. She clutched her clipboard tighter. I am on the clock. I am an employee of an auditing firm. I do not sit in VIP booths. I do not drink on the job. And I certainly do not fraternize with the subject of a financial investigation. If you want to kill me over the ledger, Mr. Russo, I suggest you do it quietly in an alley, because I am not doing a walk of shame across this ballroom just to be your evening's entertainment. A collective gasp echoed from the nearest tables. Matteo, who had stopped halfway to the event planner, spun around, his hand instinctively dropping to the bulge inside his suit jacket. Dominic stared at her. For 10 agonizing seconds, he didn't blink. He just looked at this soft, full-figured woman in a cheap dress who had just publicly defied a man who routinely ordered executions before breakfast. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Matteo, stand down, Dominic commanded softly. He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of Madeline's ear. The heat of his breath made her shiver uncontrollably. You have fire, Madeline. I like fire. But let me make this perfectly clear. You found my money. That makes you my problem. I am trying to offer you a way out of a very shallow grave. Now you can put the clipboard down and walk with me to that table like a queen, or I can throw you over my shoulder and carry you there while all these people watch. He pulled back, his dark eyes glittering with dangerous promise. "What's it going to be, sweetheart?" Madeline looked at his broad shoulders, then glanced past him at the VIP booth. Isabella was practically vibrating with rage, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the leather sofa. The sheer absurdity of the situation washed over Madeline. She was trapped. She was in danger. But as she looked back into Dominic's eyes, she saw something else. A possessive, undeniable hunger that made her pulse race in a way it never had before. With shaking hands, Madeline slowly lowered the clipboard and set it on the nearby serving tray. Dominic's smile turned feral. He held out his arm. Taking a deep breath, Madeline slipped her trembling hand through the crook of his elbow. His muscles were rock-hard beneath the expensive wool of his suit. As they turned to face the ballroom, Dominic placed his other hand firmly on her lower back, his large fingers splaying possessively over the curve of her waist. Together, the Mafia king and the plus-size accountant walked slowly across the center of the ballroom floor. The silence was deafening. Madeline felt the burning stares of 100 people on her skin. She felt the vicious, confused glares of the models as Dominic led her right past their section, completely ignoring them for a second time. He didn't guide her to the sofas where they sat. Instead, he led her to his private elevated booth at the back of the room, pulling out a plush velvet chair for her. As Madeline sat down, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, Dominic took the seat beside her. He leaned in close, the scent of tobacco and power wrapping around her like a cage. "Good girl," he whispered, tracing a finger down the trembling line of her jaw. "Now let's talk about how you're going to survive the weekend." The leather of the VIP booth was buttery soft, a stark contrast to the rigid, terrifying posture of the men surrounding it. Dominic poured a glass of Armand de Brignac champagne and slid it across the dark oak table toward Madeline. She didn't touch it. Her mind was racing faster than the high-frequency trading algorithms she audited for JP Morgan Chase during her day job. She was sitting shoulder to shoulder with the most dangerous man in the Midwest, and the entire room was watching her. "Drink," Dominic commanded softly, his deep voice carrying an irresistible weight. "You look like you are about to pass out, and if you faint, Matteo will think he needs to carry you. I do not want another man touching you." Madeline swallowed hard, her throat painfully dry. She picked up the crystal flute, her fingers trembling so violently that the golden liquid sloshed against the rim. She took a desperate sip. The champagne was cold and sharp, grounding her frantic senses. "Why me?" she finally asked, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. She gestured vaguely toward the sea of glittering, emaciated models, still glaring at them from across the velvet ropes. "You have your pick of absolute perfection out there. Women who have graced the covers of Vogue. I am an accountant. I buy my clothes on clearance. I take up too much space." Dominic's dark eyes flashed with sudden, blinding intensity. He leaned forward, boxing her in against the corner of the booth. His broad chest hovered mere inches from her full breasts, his heavy gaze dropping to the deep cleavage created by her simple wrap dress. "Perfection is boring," Dominic murmured, lifting a hand to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. His knuckles grazed her soft, plush cheek. "Those women out there, they starve themselves to fit into a mold created by men who hate women. They are fragile, brittle. If I held them the way I want to hold a woman, they would break. But you—" He let his hand trail down the side of her neck, resting his palm heavily on her shoulder. His touch was a brand, scorching through the thin fabric of her dress. "You are soft. You are substantial." He continued, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with raw, unfiltered desire. You take up exactly the amount of space you are supposed to. When I saw you hiding in that corner, wrapped in that cheap black dress, all I could think about was how your thighs would feel wrapped around my waist. All I could see was a real woman. Madeline gasped, her cheeks burning with a ferocious blush. No man had ever spoken to her like this. She was used to being the invisible friend, the smart co-worker, the wallflower, who was too heavy to be considered truly desirable in the ruthless, superficial circles of Chicago's elite. To hear this beautiful, terrifying apex predator worship her body out loud was intoxicating. It was a dangerous, addictive drug. But she was not stupid. She knew the reality of her situation. "You are trying to distract me," Madeline said, forcing herself to sit up straighter, refusing to let his proximity melt her resolve. "You think if you flatter me, I will magically forget that you are threatening my life over a $20 million money laundering scheme." Dominic chuckled, a rich, dark sound that rumbled in his chest. "I am not flattering you, Madeline. I am stating facts. But you are right. We have business to discuss." The ledger. He leaned back, adjusting the cuffs of his Brioni suit. The atmosphere shifted instantly from predatory romance to ice-cold business. "The shell company, Southside Imports," Dominic began, his eyes locking onto hers. "You found the discrepancies in the catering invoices. What you do not know is that the Dirksen Federal Building already has a grand jury quietly assembling. The FBI is watching KPMG. If you suddenly delete that file, or if you disappear tonight, the feds will know I got to you. They will raid my warehouses by morning. You cannot just erase the audit." Madeline's blood ran cold. The champagne suddenly tasted like ash. "So I am trapped. If I submit it, you go to prison, and your men kill me. If I delete it, the FBI raids you, and your men kill me anyway." "Nobody is killing you," Dominic growled, the sudden violence in his tone making her jump. "I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let anyone touch a single hair on your head. But we need a solution. You are the financial genius. You found the leak. Now, you are going to fix it." Before Madeline could process the sheer absurdity of his demand, the heavy mahogany doors of the ballroom blew open with a deafening crash. The string quartet's music morphed into horrific shrieks. Men in heavy tactical gear, completely devoid of police insignias, flooded the entryway. Automatic gunfire shattered the crystal chandeliers above, raining sharp, glittering glass down upon the screaming socialites and terrified models. It wasn't the FBI. It was a hit squad. "Get down!" Dominic roared. He didn't hesitate. The Mafia boss lunged across the table, his massive body completely covering Madeline's as he tackled her to the plush carpet beneath the booth. The deafening roar of gunfire echoed through the opulent room, tearing through velvet drapery and shattering the pristine illusion of the charity gala. Madeline lay pinned to the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The sheer weight of Dominic's body shielding hers was the only thing anchoring her to reality. Above them, Matteo and the rest of Dominic's security detail were returning fire, their heavy pistols booming rhythmically over the chaotic screams of the crowd. "Stay exactly here," Dominic ordered, his mouth pressed against her ear over the deafening noise. He drew a sleek black firearm from his shoulder holster. "Do not move, Madeline. I mean it." He rolled off her, popping up over the edge of the booth to return fire. Madeline pressed her hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. The terror was absolute, but beneath the paralyzing fear, her brilliant analytical mind began to piece together the puzzle fragments. The tactical gear, The lack of police badges, the specific angle of the attack, focused entirely on the VIP section. This was not a random assault. This was a calculated assassination attempt, and whoever was funding it had pockets deep enough to hire professional mercenaries. Suddenly, the gunfire ceased. The heavy, suffocating silence that followed was broken only by the whimpers of the guests and the crunching of glass under heavy boots. "Clear!" Matteo shouted from across the room. Dominic reached down, his strong hands grasping Madeleine's waist, and hauled her to her feet with effortless strength. She was shaking violently, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Dominic immediately pulled her flush against his chest, wrapping his arms securely around her soft, trembling frame. "You are safe," he murmured fiercely into her hair. "I have you." Who were they?" Madeleine stammered, looking at the destruction of the ballroom. Isabella and the other models were huddled under a distant table, their makeup smeared, looking utterly broken and terrified. "The Romanov Syndicate," Dominic spat, his eyes dark with murderous rage. "They have been trying to push into my territory for 6 months. They must have learned about the audit. They knew I would be exposed tonight." Madeleine froze in his arms. Her mind snapped into sharp, crystalline focus. The numbers, the ledger, the discrepancies. "Wait," Madeleine breathed, pushing back slightly to look up into his face. "The Romanovs. Does their front company operate out of the West Loop? A holding firm called Blackstone Logistics?" Dominic frowned, confusion momentarily replacing his anger. "Yes." "Why?" A wild, brilliant twist of realization hit Madeleine. The fear evaporating from her veins was entirely replaced by the cold, calculated thrill of an auditor finding the ultimate loophole. She had the power. She held the keys to the entire kingdom. "Dominic," Madeleine said, her voice completely steady, ringing with sudden authority. "I didn't just find your shell company in the ledger. I found a secondary injection of funds, millions of dollars bleeding into the charity's accounts from an external source. It was masked through Blackstone Logistics. I thought you were using multiple fronts, but I was wrong." Dominic stared at her, his jaw clenching as the realization dawned on him. "They weren't just trying to kill me tonight. They were framing me for the extra funds. They wanted the FBI to find the ledger and trace all of their dirty money back to my family." "Exactly," Madeleine said, a fierce, triumphant light in her eyes. The curvy, invisible accountant was completely gone. In her place stood a woman who wielded financial ledgers like lethal weapons. "If I delete the file, the FBI raids you. If I submit it as is, you go down for their crimes." "So what is your play, sweetheart?" Dominic asked, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. He was utterly captivated. The sheer brilliance radiating from her soft, generous body was the most intoxicating thing he had ever witnessed. "I don't delete the audit," Madeleine said, stepping closer to him, her heavy breasts brushing against his suit jacket. She wasn't hiding her body anymore. She was weaponizing her intelligence. "I restructure it. Give me a laptop and 3 hours. I will completely wipe Southside imports from the blockchain trace and reroute every single fraudulent transaction directly into the lap of Blackstone Logistics. When the grand jury convenes on Monday, the FBI won't be looking at you. They will be tearing the Romanov Syndicate apart piece by piece." Matteo, standing a few feet away, let out a low whistle of pure respect. Dominic reached out, gripping the back of Madeleine's neck. His fingers tangled in her brown hair. The possessiveness in his grip was absolute. "You would do that for me? You would burn a rival Mafia family to the ground using nothing but a spreadsheet?" "I am not doing it for you," Madeline whispered, her heart pounding as she looked up into his dark, hungry eyes. "I am doing it for my life. But in exchange, you are going to pay me double my corporate salary. You are going to guarantee my absolute safety. And you are never, ever going to order me around like one of your disposable runway models again." Dominic let out a rough, breathless laugh. He didn't hesitate. He leaned down and captured her lips in a bruising, passionate kiss. It was a kiss of sealing contracts, of violent obsession, and of absolute worship. He tasted her champagne, her fear, and her undeniable fire. His hands roamed down her back, squeezing her plush, generous hips, pulling her flush against his hardening body. "You are a terrifying woman, Madeline Hayes," Dominic murmured against her swollen lips as they finally broke apart. He looked at her with a devotion that bordered on religious. "You are hired, and you are mine." The Mafia boss didn't walk past any more models. He had found his queen in the shadows, and together they were going to rewrite the entire city's ledger in blood and ink. Did this bold move leave you breathless? If you loved this intense Mafia romance, full of wild twists and undeniable passion, hit that like button right now. Do not forget to share this video with your friends who crave a fierce Mafia boss and a brilliant heroine who refuses to back down. Subscribe to our channel and turn on alerts so you never miss a thrilling chapter of our original audio dramas. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment.